Boom! We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. This is the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel, and I thank all of you for being here, wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. This is the 2025-2026 Iowa basketball men's preview, or Iowa men's basketball preview. And I just want to tell you guys right off the bat, I have been excited every single time that I've done this, but this is probably the most excited for a season that I've been. I mean, it's hard to gauge because there has been, I would have to look back in my memory bank and remember exactly when I started to do this on YouTube. Um, and putting out official season previews and how many of those I've done. Um, if I was doing this when Luka Garza was with Iowa, obviously that was a big year. That was very exciting. So I would have to go back, but either way, just comparing it to the last couple of years. I was excited for those years, and the last couple of Fran McCaffrey years, and they definitely had their own positives in their own right, question marks and things that if Iowa could do would make this season successful. But this is just different. Iowa has had the same coach and in a lot of ways the same team for so long. At least the last back half, 5 to 8 years of Fran McCaffrey's tenure. And so now we're stepping into a new era. And for what it's worth, I do think that that speaks positively on Iowa men's basketball and just Iowa sports in general. That now some people would disagree with this, but that they don't move on left, right, and center. And coaches aren't moving on left, right, and center. I think that speaks to the community. I think that speaks to the people who are involved at the University of Iowa. Because if you look at other programs around the country, Florida's and other schools, like for example, Florida football, how many coaches have they had in the last, 10 years, 10, 15 years? Whereas you compare it to a school like Iowa, both men's and basketball and football, and that's not the case. Iowa has had has had two football coaches in the last 40 plus years. That says something. Now, again, and I think this is a different video that I want to do in the future with regards to kind of examining the current landscape. When I was listening to some of these people discuss James Franklin being fired from Penn State, there were a lot of different takes. And one of the more unique takes that I heard was that kind of the best place for a coach to be is at like a middling program, because you're still getting paid a lot of money in the Power Four. You're still getting paid a lot of money. Um, you look at some of these coaches, they're getting paid upwards of, $8, $9 million a year. So you're still getting good money, but you don't have the pressure and the expectations that you would have at some of the, blue blood programs, USC, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan. So I thought that that was an interesting take, and I say that to just juxtapose it with, yes, it is good most of the time to be a program that is consistent and doesn't have all of this tumultuous behavior going on left, right, and center. Um, it does speak to the program itself, the culture, the environment, the state, the fans. But it also speaks a little bit to the expectations for that school and what is considered success and what success is okay to repeat over and over and over again. What I mean by that is it for football, 10 wins a season, or is it nine, 8 or 9 wins, or maybe even seven, but closer to the 8, 9 win mark where Iowa usually is at. So, bringing this back to Iowa men's basketball, again, I think that same concept existed with Iowa basketball. And for what it's worth, Fran McCaffrey, and I'm not going to dive into this too much just to keep this video as succinct and short as possible, but I think Iowa did give Fran McCaffrey a legitimate shot at remedying the program and rectifying some of the shortcomings. And some of the shortcomings, and I'm only overviewing this to kind of lead us into where we're at now. And I have done that previously, but I think it's important to do, especially on a season preview video. Some of the shortcomings included the defensive end. Iowa men's basketball, no matter how many times we were told in the offseason that they were, working hard in the offseason and they were putting all this effort and attention on the defensive side of the court, we just didn't really see over the span of a season that come to fruition over the last 5 years of Fran McCaffrey's era. And I always remind people, like, Fran McCaffrey's teams weren't always terrible defensively. Like, if you look at the beginning of his career, that the defense was just as good as the offense, at times even better. The Gazelle years, Woodbury years, Jared Utoff, Aaron White. It was more just the latter, 5 to 8 years that this began to become the case. And Iowa would be able to either start okay, especially with some lower competition, and we'd kind of get this fool's gold where we're like, oh, and I fell into it myself, where I'm like, oh man, Iowa's defense is improving, and man, if they can keep this up, this is going to be one heck of a season if they can pair this with the explosive offense that they have, and it just never happened. And then you start to question, well, is it systemic? Is it the coaches on the roster? Is it the players that are being recruited? And the answer is it's probably all of them. Then on top of that, you start to question, okay, well, Iowa's offense is really good, but is it at the expense of the defense? Or are they putting so much emphasis on pace of play and the offense that it really is um, shorting their defense as a whole? How the players view it, the energy they're able to expel, so on and so on. Um, the respect that they put on that side of the ball, the value that they place on it. And I honestly, I think that there was some truth to that. That Iowa's offense culturally, or Iowa as a team culturally, had become so offensive minded that over the course of a year, it was very hard to sustain any sort of, good defensive performance. At times they would be good, but at times they were terrible, bad. Sometimes they were average. It was really like this, especially with some of the upper levels of college basketball, especially in Big Ten play. And again, I do think that there's something to be said about pace of play. And this is why, leading this into this season, why I really am liking what I'm seeing from Ben McCollum as he is stepping in, because he has immediately stated, in opposition or analyzing his previous coaching stops, when asked if he's going to bring some of the same results that we've seen at his previous schools, Drake, and I think what is it, Northwest Missouri State or whatever it um, is that going to be brought to Iowa? And his answer has been consistently yes. He kind of has a mindset of what he would like to see. He does want his team to be controlled and dictating the pace of play and putting an emphasis on the defense side of the ball. But mainly, he's going to look at the personnel that he has. And that is something to kind of dictate what is best for them. Are they a high shooting efficiency team? Do they have a bunch of 3 point shooters around the court? Are they quick? Are they fast? Are they a more athletic team that can get up and down the court and really put pressure on both sides athletically? Are they a balanced team? And that's going to dictate kind of what they do. Do they have a really dominant big man that can slow the pace of play and just dump it down and really work it? And he can be plugged down low and give you defensive stops. Um, all of that is important. And I love that he has said that. And I love that that is his coaching style. Whereas you look at the previous tenure, we didn't really hear that from Fran McCaffrey. Fran McCaffrey never really talked about on a X's and O's the strategy that was implemented from season to season. We didn't hear a lot from him about we're gonna it's gonna depend on the personnel, how fast we're playing. It was or how slow we decide to play. It was always no, we like to play fast, we like to get it. If a team scores a basket, no problem, we're gonna get down and push it and score. And again, that for some years it was a really good thing, and for a certain period it was mostly a good thing, I would say. But then it ended up being a situation where the players are so high on that mindset to where it's like, okay, really, who cares if they score, because we're just going to get it and go and push it. And it's just like defense is another barrier to them just getting it to the offensive side of the basketball or the game where they want to be, rather than a truly important facet of the game. They're going to score on us. We're not going to be disrespected by it, because no matter what, we're just going to take it and we're going to go. And Iowa fans got tired of it. I got tired of it. um, for what it's worth, I was willing to give Fran McCaffrey perhaps one more year when I saw some of the players that he was recruiting. I think in the end, this was the right decision. Beth Gates was deciding to make potentially a legacy hire, to really put a staple to her tenure at the University of Iowa. But fans were extremely apathetic about the program. There is no denying that. There is no channel that was more honest about that than me. I consistently said that the fan base was extremely apathetic about Iowa men's basketball, and I knew it just because by looking at the comments, by judging how I was viewing Iowa men's basketball. And you look at McCollum, and it's exactly what the doctor ordered. Like a team, a coach that is going to instill in his players a source of pride, toughness, around his roster. That is what Iowa fans really wanted. In some ways, Fran McCaffrey was a victim of his own success, but still, sometimes it is just time to make a change. Ben McCollum is young. He's an up and comer. He's a guy that I and many other fans can potentially see at Iowa for the next 10 years and really build this into a amazing program. He has those connections, those ties. He takes pride in the University of Iowa. Not to say that Fran McCaffrey didn't, but probably not as much. Fran McCaffrey had his boys playing for the team, which obviously brought its own issues. Now, Ben McCollum so far has done the same thing, but again, that's maybe the only slight blemish thus far in his early tenure. But again, I'm not necessarily against that. You just have to know as a coach that if you do that, if it's not a resounding success, you're going to receive criticism. And that's it. I think the McCaffrey boys, what made it more difficult is they were on scholarship. A lot of times, sometimes they weren't, but quite frankly, they really were, for the most part, good enough to be on scholarship. I mean, they were pretty highly rated kids coming out of high school. So I don't really have much of an issue with that personally. I'm just speaking on kind of what the fan base was thinking. And then the last thing that I think Fran McCaffrey lacked was he just was not interested in connecting with the fan base. He wasn't interested in putting Iowa basketball front and center and advertising the program and what they were about and the coaching staff and the new excitement at the University of Iowa, or any sort of excitement at the University of Iowa. It just really kind of became this status quo um, situation when Fran McCaffrey was there towards the end of his career. And, Ben McCollum, and again, that led to lowering of ticket sales. Yes, Carver Hawkeye has its own issues, but again, Ben McCollum talked about that. I guarantee it was discussed in his interview with Beth Gates. Like that, he has already shown that he has a willingness to do this. It helps in recruiting. It helps get the fans engaged to go front and center and sell your program to the masses. Like that is what you need to do, especially in this digital era. Now, one more comment on Ben McCollum. I can see him here for the next 10 years. As I was commenting on how young of a coach he is. Um, for what it's worth, though, even though he's young, like the guy seems super put together, mature. He's very calm. I love the kind of stoicness that he speaks. He's very articulate. I can see families totally being okay sending their boys to go play for him. In this day and age, though, don't we still need to see this put together, all of this put together. And so while I can see him here for the next 10 years, as is the case with Luke Fickell, just to put it as an example, like you never really know for sure what's going to happen. I feel 95% sure about this hire, that this is a slam dunk hire, but you never truly, truly, truly know. And the early signs have been great, but we need to see what's going to happen on the court. And speaking to the 10 years thing, in this day and age, you never truly know a guy's heart. If he starts to have success and he suddenly a Kansas or a North Carolina or something like that comes open, you never really know if they will stay or not. But as things stand right now, I feel pretty good leaning on the side and erring on the side that he is committed to the University of Iowa. All right, guys, let's start with the season preview officially. So I just wanted to give that prelude and an introduction into how we got here and why I'm excited for this upcoming men's basketball season. So that's going to serve effectively as the monologue for this video. Let's look at the Iowa men's basketball roster and look at some of the guys that Ben McCollum has been able to bring in to revamp this University of Iowa roster. But before we do, again, as many of you I'm sure are aware, everybody who was on the roster last year, pretty much everybody was gone. There's only two guys that remained, and that was Cooper Koch and one more. It might have been a walk on. I need to see the roster to see who that is. Everybody decided to leave. I think if you look at the grand scheme of things, obviously, I think Ben McCollum would have been okay with landing either Owen Freeman, Josh Dix, or uh, Peyton Sanford, or Price Sanford rather. Obviously, I think Josh Dix would have fit perfectly in the Ben McCollum system and would have fit perfectly alongside a Bennett Sturts. Like, can you imagine a backcourt of Josh Dix and Bennett Sturts? Like, the combination of kind of this combo guard, both can shoot, both can attack the rim, both are heady players, would have been great. But there were varying reasons why that didn't come to fruition, but still, Ben McCollum went to work on revamping the roster, and he absolutely did. All right, Hawk fans, here is the roster. Hmm. Um, Let me give it a second. Iowa, obviously Ben McCollum obviously landed a majority of this roster from Drake, which is good. They're proven winners, albeit not at the Power Four level. But if you go back and look at Drake's success versus Power Four teams last year, it was pretty high, which is good. Um, Cam Menyawu is a junior. He's going to have 1 year left. Tavion Banks is here. I think he did get into trouble. We'll see if there's a suspension there. He had um, either a OWI or a public intoxication. I think it was a public intoxication. Um, Iowa went and landed from formerly Robert Morris, 6'10", Spaniard Alvaro Folgueras. And I'm very excited about him. I think Iowa's going to know exactly how to use him. He didn't do very well in the I think it was either like the European Championships or the under like 21 or under 20 World Championships. Um, I think it was under 20 like European championships or something like that. But it could have been world championship. He didn't do very good in that. Unfortunately, I think Spain struggled in their usage of him. He was the go-to guy for what it's worth. Um, let's see if they have it jotted down what it was the under 20 Euro basket championship. So, um, he was the focal point. I watched some of those games. Spain was trying to run everything through him, but kind of the offensive system and stuff. It just didn't work out. Ben McCollum spoke to it and said that they had guys that were missing, and so he had to take on roles that maybe he wasn't as accustomed to playing, and he would admit that it wasn't his best performance. And they didn't, essentially they didn't use them in the right way. So we'll take that for what it is. Pete McCollum, the son of Ben McCollum. Maybe it was Jacob Koch was the other Iowa player from last year that decided to stay. But Cooper Koch, aka Cooper Coach, aka Cooper Coke, um, is the other guy.
Cooper Koch.
Cooper Catch. And then we have Kale Combs, which I'll circle back to, Bennett Sturts, the 5-star, potential. I mean, everybody's forecasting him to be a first round top 15 draft pick. And I can see it. I mean, he's 6'4". He's got NBA size. He's very long. He can shoot it. He's a great passer. He's an NBA point guard. Is he a future NBA starting point guard? Time will tell. But the kid is super smart. He's very cool and calm, but he does play with a silent passion. He's not quite Joe Wieskamp, but he still has some passion yet there, but he is still pretty calm. Iowa landed 4-star transfer portal from Kansas State last year. Brendan Housen. They went and reclassified and got Trey Thompson to reclassify, who was a 2026 top 75 recruit, top 50 by some recruiting services, being considered by Tennessee, Indiana, Purdue. Like they all wanted him. But Iowa was able to convince him. One of his teammates had left the school he was at, so he was open to reclassification, and they landed him. This is a huge get. My one concern with him is anytime you have a reclassification, it might work against you because especially for a kid that had the notoriety that he had, if he doesn't get a lot of playing time in year one, I am concerned that he is going to start fielding offers from other schools. Not because of anything I've heard about him or anything like that. It's just what I've seen in college sports. Like, there's highly rated guys that if they don't get a lot of playing time in year one, they're gone. And, this is a guy that it would be pretty understandable if he doesn't get a ton of playing time in year one. I mean, he is supposed to be a senior in high school. With that said, I do think he'll see the floor at least some. He's very talented. He's a good kid. Ben McCollum says that his offensive game has translated excellently. What's going to determine the amount of playing time is his defense. So, obviously in spot duty or some sort of role, he'll be able to be utilized, but is it enough to avoid a red shirt? We'll see. So that's my concern with him, and I really hope Iowa was able to hold on to him because he's really talented. Isaiah Howard, Tate Sage, super under the radar get. Iowa was able to get him. He was committed to Drake from the state of Oklahoma, 6'7". Really can play guard, positions 1 through 3. Not a stereotypical forward per se. I mean, he can handle the rock. He's very much perimeter based. So, and then there's Joey Mattioni from Drake, redshirt freshman. Didn't see a ton of playing time last year. We'll see how his development goes. He's still pretty young. His biggest issue is physically. He needs to get there physically. He's very skinny. He's 220 pounds. You look at Trevin Urich, he's 250 pounds. He does have 2 inches on him. And then, of course, but we'll see where he's at this year. And then there's Trevin Urich. Um, this is going to go down as such a gem of a get. He was committed to Northern Iowa. He grew, I think, multiple inches from his junior to senior year. He played guard. And then all of a sudden he's a 6'11" big guy and he has all those guard skills. Again, physically, needed to drop some fat, a little bit, some baby fat, which he admitted. But high IQ, plays the game the right way, looks all of 6'11". He's going to surprise. Like everything I've seen, he's going to play a decent role this year. Will it be significant? I'm not willing to commit to that yet, but he's going to play a role. Iowa needs a big guy like him. They did not land a big man in the transfer portal, which was the one need that they weren't able to. Well, there's two needs. One, it was a big guy, and two was a backup guard to Bennett Sturts, maybe a younger guard that could kind of develop in his shadows. Iowa did have the kid that came from Florida International, but he decided to. Uh, Decommit and go back to Florida International. Not really sure exactly what happened there, but yeah, I think it would have been nice had Iowa had him. He had some promise, but it didn't work out. But speaking to Trevin Urich, I mean, he again, this I cannot say this enough. This both him and the other kid, Tate Sage, they're both going to be contributors throughout their career. Trevin Urich, as he continues to refine physically, is just going to get better and better and better. He's going to play a role this year. Iowa just doesn't have the size to not have him play a role. And I mean, that's pretty much it. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. He's going to have to play. His feet are going to be thrown directly in the fire, and he's going to be thrown in the deep end too. And we're going to see if he sinks or swims. I think he's going to be fine. I'm not saying he's going to have a phenomenal freshman year, but for a freshman, for him to be able to come in and contribute in any sort of way, it will be big, especially considered that he was committed to Northern Iowa. So I'm very excited about him, and I think you guys should be too. So yeah. All right, guys, what do I think about this roster? Well, this is about as good of a roster as one can get, without a ton of holdover from the previous roster. Um, and in the current landscape with NIL and all of that, I mean, what Ben McCollum did, how aggressively he went after the transfer portal, and how aggressively his young coaching staff that has a ton of energy, a ton of connections, which I love, by the way. I forgot to mention that in the beginning monologue. Um, they worked hard and they addressed pretty much every single need. Um, I think that this is a talented roster. I do. I think that this roster is already more talented than last year's roster for Iowa. Not by a lot, but it is more talented. Not that that's the end all be all, because again, you can have talent, but if your system and points of emphasis are not where it needs to be, like we saw last year with Fran McCaffrey, you're going to come up short. But I do think that this team is more talented. Again, not by a lot, but it is more talented. They have an NBA draft pick in Bennett Sturts. Obviously, we'll have to see how he's able to do in the Big Ten, but I think he's going to be fine. He's a preseason first team All Big Ten. Um, the talent is there. So I don't think you guys should be concerned with that. I think the sneaky get was Alvaro Folgueres. He's going to take a little bit to get acclimated, I think, but this is a guy that's 6'10". He's not a traditional center. I think all things being equal, he'd probably do better as a small ball five, but more traditionally as a power forward. Um, but I think in this roster, he might have to kind of be a positionless five. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, Brennan Hausen can shoot the rock. Is one of the best shooters in the entire country. This team has athleticism. It's not super athletic, but they have athleticism enough to compete in the Big Ten. They have length. Kale Combs, I think, is going to surprise some people based on what I've seen in some of the off-season videos. So yeah. All right, guys, let me give you guys my predicted starting five. All right, guys. So this is going to be my starting five right here. I have Bennett Sturts one. And the reason why I don't put point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power, et cetera, is because I think in this day and age, it's really positionless basketball, even though we know essentially what positions they're playing, but it's more accurate to put it this way, just to not confuse. Bennett Sturts, Brendan Hausen, which obviously Brendan Hausen kind of limits the hurt of Josh Dix going elsewhere. Although, man, it still would have been nice to have him as an option coming off the bench or something behind Josh Dix. Um, Josh Dick still probably would have been a slightly better role from a ball handling perspective. But actually, Brendan Hausen may end up working better because of how much of a catch and shoot player he is. He's not going to chew up a lot of time holding on to the rock and take away from Bennett Sturts, your first round draft pick. But that's a strong backcourt right there, one of the better backcourts in the entire Big Ten, if not, top five, I'd say, in the Big Ten. Tavion Banks, who averaged 10 points a game last year, coming off the bench mostly. He's 6'7". Cam Manyawu is 6'9". He averaged 7 points a game last year for Drake. And then Alvaro Folgueres to round it out. Now, I wouldn't be surprised. Some possible changes that I could see is if Iowa feels good enough about where Trevin Urich is at, is doing this. Let me kind of put an aside here. Is having Trevin Urich at the five and a Alvaro at the four. I don't know exactly how to spell his last name. That's the best I can do right now. Um, and Tavion Banks still everything else stays the same. Um, because with this lineup, the shooting is not bad. Obviously you have it in Sturts and Hausen and Alvaro can shoot the ball fine too for a big guy, but it is a little bit limited in the kind of forward positions. Um, and I would be a little bit concerned about the ball handling ability here. Like I would, but if it's just one of them, it's not as bad. Now, the ball handling, if it's like this with Banks and then, everything else is the same, I mean, you still kind of have a similar problem. The only way that it would improve is if either Tate Sage, Cooper Koch, or uh, Trey Thompson are ready to day one step into the starting three spot. And I just don't think any of them are ready. Maybe Cooper Koch, but even Cooper Koch wouldn't add that much of a improved ball handling unless he's improved a lot in the offseason. but it would give you an added element of shooting ability. So, in any lineup, there's going to be some drawbacks and some places where you're a little bit weak, but or aren't the strongest. Maybe is a better way to put it. But I think that this is still a very strong starting five. And there's not a massive drop back for the guys behind. I think, if you're looking at depth, it'll probably be Kale Combs will get a majority of those, secondary reps at the point guard. That's what we've seen in the offseason videos. Probably at the two, maybe Isaiah Howard. Um, he's looked okay in some of the videos that I've seen. Um, so, that's kind of the depth there. Um, at the three, I think it could be there's no clear cut between Sage, um, Koch, and Thompson. I would probably say that Koch and Sage are a little bit ahead. Probably Koch is the furthest ahead as he's actually played a year of college basketball. Well, not a full year as he got injured, but does have a little bit more experience. But that's what I would have there. And then, past that here, I mean, maybe Mattioni is another depth piece there. Maybe you can get Thompson and Sage to play a little four, but you are a little thin there if Iowa does get into foul trouble. Just looking at the roster, yeah, you don't have a ton of depth with the power forward. Spot. I mean, Mattioni would really be the guy that if you're in trouble, and multiple guys, but you'd probably turn to Thompson, Koch, or um, Sage to fill that out. Now, finally, guys, let's look at the schedule, and then I will give you guys my prediction. I don't think I'm going to do oh, actually, let's look at this first. This is the Big Ten preseason media poll. Iowa, I was pretty okay with where they had Iowa. Like at 8, that's pretty strong, and I agree with that. I can see Iowa being maybe a little bit higher. I can make the case for that, maybe 7 or maybe 6. But the biggest case I would make is just that Bennett Sturts is that good, and it would will Iowa to victory. Um, in that kind of upper quarter of the league. But I think 8 is pretty accurate. They still have more to prove, but the roster that they do have is talented, and people are excited about them. I think 8 is accurate. So let's see if anybody has, and then Bennett Sturts was a preseason All Big Ten. Um, All Big Ten conference. I don't know if it's just one versus two, first team, second team, but so that's that. Let's look at the schedule. Uh, Alvaro will be able to play his former team in Robert Morris. By the way, guys, Iowa did play an exhibition game against St. Louis. They did lose the game. It was 5 quarters of 12 minutes. I don't know if it was running clock or stopping clock. But apparently Iowa in the last it was either 2 or 3 quarters really took out their main group of guys and let some of the younger guys get some action. Um, you know, Everything that was said is in those first couple of quarters they absolutely competed. Not a ton of concern coming out of that, which is good. Um, Did St. Louis have their backups in there, or did they keep their starters in there? We don't really know that, but that's the answer as to kind of why they lost to St. Louis and why it shouldn't be too concerning. Iowa really just Iowa, and it's the smart thing to do. I mean, if you're in an exhibition game, like you need to develop. Because the game doesn't matter. The win loss does not matter. So you're better off trying to develop um, your roster and figure out lineups and get guys some minutes that could use those minutes than trying to win the game. Robert Morris should be a decent first test for Iowa. I don't know how good they've been of late, but they're usually not a terrible team. I mean, look at that, guys. They won 26 games last year, in the Horizon League. So yeah, definitely not a bad team. Xavier should be a good game in Iowa City. Ole Miss, it looks like this is a tournament. The Acrisure Classic, Grand Canyon, or Utah. Both those two programs are solid. Iowa played Utah last year and beat them. They lost to Utah State. Grand Canyon has been on the ups, made the NCAA tournament at least one time. Iowa played them and beat them. Um, Iowa will play Iowa State. They have the two early Big Ten games. I think that these two early Big Ten games are solid, not too difficult early Big Ten games. At Michigan State, still winnable. It'll be definitely a tough first game for Iowa. Um, I wouldn't expect them to win that game just looking at it right now, but it's still a game that they can compete in and get their feet wet, and is winnable. I think the goal here should be to at the very least split the first two. Winning both would be great, but this is a manageable first two at Iowa State. That's going to be a tough one. Iowa State, continues to be a solid program, but that's going to be another resume building game. Um, and then, Bucknell, that might be okay. You get some more Big Ten action, and you know, obviously, plenty of opportunities here. My final thoughts. Like I said, I'm not going to predict every single game like I've done. This is what I will say. I think that this Iowa team has the talent to make the NCAA tournament. Um, they have a guy like a dude that you need to carry you to the promised land that Iowa at times was missing last year. At times it was Owen Freeman, at times it was Josh Dix, but it was never consistently one guy. Like we saw from Luka Garza and other players in the past. Bennett Sturts is a phenomenal player. And this team is solid all the way through. Like, do I think that this team is talented enough to win the Big Ten? Probably not. I don't think that they have the depth yet. But again, some of the guys or the talent, but if some of the guys take some steps forward that I wasn't anticipating, like you never know. There are some guys on the roster that absolutely could have taken some big steps forward. That's the case every year. But where things stand now, I'd probably say no. But where Iowa should be shooting is at the very least have a top 10 finish in year one. If they can have a top 10 finish in the league in year one, I would consider that successful. Um, that would kind of be my bare minimum for success. What I would love to see is if they can finish top eight, where their preseason ranking is. And that would be a really solid first year. And then obviously anything past that would just be great. Um, I think if Iowa can finish the season a few games over 500, and t hell, even touch the 20 win mark, again, that would be considered a successful season. Now, what would be great would be they have enough wins to make the NCAA tournament. But the bare minimum is to finish above 500, Now, all of that's relative. If you finish above 500, but you're terrible in the Big Ten, I guess what I'm saying is if they have a top 10 finish, um, in the Big Ten, and then on top of that, if they finish, 2, 3 games above 500, hell, even just one game above 500, I think that would still be a good first year, or bare minimum successful first year. But again, that's not my full blown expectation. I think that this team is talented enough to go past that. You just don't. I just don't want to put too much pressure on a year one coach in the Big Ten. Like, anything is it's much harder competition, and so that just is what it is. But my prediction is that this Iowa team will finish top 8 in the Big Ten. It will be a solid first year. Um, I think that they will be just shy of the NCAA tournament, but I would not be surprised in the least if they are an NCAA tournament caliber team. I'll just say that right now. But I think right now I would err on the side of them being just short, like a bubble team, which is where most other analysts have them. Like most of these bracketologists have them as a bubble team. There's a few that have them making it, but they're not like a perennial expected NCAA tournament team. So I'm not saying anything that's out of the ordinary here. So and then, of course, Bennett Sturts have a great year. Brennan Hausen to take a step forward. I think Alvaro needs to be the number 2 guy for the Hawkeyes. And yeah. All right, guys, that is the Iowa men's basketball 2025-2026 season preview. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, share. Last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy, will in facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you, Hawk fans. See you guys next time. Go Hawks. Bye bye.